alludes to a little bit more advancement than initial phase of a project. And I think that was my question, because I was under the assumption that this is the initial phase where landowners do have a chance to weigh in. But if it's not being looked at in any other corridor than within that, then it's not, you're testing one simple corridor. There isn't a plan B or a plan C, what she said. So that shows a far more advancement in this project than what was alluded to and disclosed.
Let me clarify, this giving this additional context might help. So just from a magnitude and a scale sense. So the blue line is, the distance between those blue lines is quarter mile. The actual surveyors within that quarter mile, they are identifying a 250-foot swath. So that's shrinking down. From quarter mile, and then within that quarter mile, we're like, all right, 250 feet is where, we'll do a desktop. We're doing desktop reviews, and then we're actually pick up field data for a narrower 250-foot area. And then we have actual field data. And from that 250 feet, the actual pipeline easement is only 50 feet. So it's, start with a bigger area, and then, hey, we're kind of narrowing it down a little bit. So it could be on the north side, it could be on the west side. And then once we have the field data, we're narrowing it down even more. And within that, we may meander, we may be on the north side, we may be on the west side. So the process, it's almost like I don't want to say process of elimination, but we're refining and narrowing down that route till we get down to that 50 foot from that quarter mile, 250. That's the
Right.
process.
So I don't think the question was actually how you narrow down within the corridor. I think the question was how you came to that corridor if this is an initial process. So it's not about within the corridor. She's asking you, is there a plan B corridor, not a plan B route within the corridor? She's asking for an actual, is there a plan B and a plan C corridor? But you're looking within the scope of one corridor, we're looking within the broader scope of the entire region. I think that's where there's a difference. And I apologize, just so you know, for interrupting you earlier when you were speaking.
Don't apologize. I feel like I'm hoping this is productive, and the more questions you guys ask, the more information we can share. So don't apologize. The other factor, so we're talking about corridors, and then we're in identifying the need for the project. We run hydraulic models on our existing system. So Enbridge has, as Chris and John mentioned, going back to many years, 1950s, there's existing gas infrastructure in Chatham County, throughout our service territory. So as we evaluate that existing infrastructure, we're able to see, where we need to do improvements. And this proposed project is connecting to our existing infrastructure in 3 locations. So we're not, exactly able to share, hey, we need to connect at this point and this point. But that's kind of, where the beginning and end, it's defining, the route needs to start here. It needs to, touch this point, it needs to touch this point, it needs to touch this point in our system, which is deriving, why we're routing the way we are.
So when did the project and your studies actually get underway? Before it noticed slowing. I think that is where there's discrepancy right now, is because it said that there's still a chance, a potential to weigh in on route considerations, that the route hasn't been determined, which has been repeatedly, I have asked and repeatedly answered, absolutely not within a set corridor. I'm asking, when was this actually put on your books? Because as we know, working with many municipalities, these things go on books, they go to planning boards, they go to city council votes. A lot goes in before surveys. And surveyors set foot on it. So when was this project initiated?
Chris, do you want to talk about the planning process?
Yeah, so, as far as an exact date, I don't know if I can tell you the exact date off the top of my head. I do know that we have run hydraulic models, and I've been in the company for 20 years. We run hydraulic models yearly for our systems. This is, for many years, been an area that we have known that eventually we're going to have to do something to it. I don't think that most of us have gotten engaged on the actual process we're talking about here, but for the last year-ish time frame. So, but as Rick said, you know, as we go through our process of modeling and determining where we need the support of the systems that we continue to reliably serve our customers, that's sort of the genesis of the route. And then we go through the various desktop level reviews, as Rick mentioned, around the environmental and cultural and things like that that we can't identify from a GIS level. And that's how we got into this smaller corridor to get more refined. Now we're going into that process of refining it even more, as Rick said, because no matter how much we try to look at the computer screen, we can't identify, like you guys already mentioned, Greg, sites in particular. There's a lot of that information we don't know, and that's where we need to get the information from you guys to try to work that out and work those details out.
You are a foreign company, and you go through the CFIS process in your planning. You are a foreign company, operating in the state of North Carolina. Is that the CFIS process in your planning?
I am not a foreign company, ma'am. I was an employee of Enbridge, North Carolina. I work in North Carolina.
North Carolina registered company.
It is.
And
We're
Enbridge out of Canada.
our legal name is Public Service Company of North Carolina Incorporated.
Okay. But your holding company is a Canadian company.
Yes.
Okay. So your ownership is a foreign.
Yeah. It's a foreign company, yes. Okay, but that is not, but the reality of what you're trying to get at, and I want to be very clear here, that is not a factor that comes into the planning of this project. And I mean, that's, again, we can have a sidebar as it relates to that. That's something totally separate from the politics of the project. But the reality is that that's not a requirement for this project. And I want to go back to Carolyn's question real quick. I think Carolyn's referencing per the conversation you and I were having related to a water line in Alamance County when you were speaking of having worked with local government and the experience and the permits and the conversations that you have to have.
Planning board
Right.
meetings.
So the reality is again, so this again is kind of an opportunity here. It's not one size fits all. And so the experience that you dealt with from a water line standpoint is not necessarily equal to the experience of what the law requires us to do as it relates to a pipeline.
Right, and we understand the difference in utility companies.
Right.
We also witnessed it many times over in other municipalities. However, typically, there has to be an initial process, an open forum with the public
Typically.
before a corridor is determined. So I think what caught me off guard and what triggered my questions, and I apologize to everyone, was understanding upon approach and understanding, entering this meeting and speaking with you guys. I thought there was a lot more flexibility available, and what I'm hearing from the project manager is that the flexibility, and when we're talking about acreage, 250 feet, a quarter of a mile, I'm sorry, but that's nominal. Very nominal.
Exactly.
So, I apologize for, taking over and asking you questions.
No, you're fine, you're fine.
I think I just need to know, because I have a due diligence for members of our LLC, but I also have a due diligence as a property owner to understand the stage that this is actually in. That said, is there a plan B corridor, is there a plan C corridor? So I think it's the flexibility, like, where are we initially just transparent?
There's no plan B, this is it.
I just want more transparency.
I'm gonna speak, this ties in. This is the proposed route.
Okay,
So,
look.
so if I may, sir.
Okay, then let me speak right after, please.
This is the proposed route, okay, so when you say, I think this is, listening to the conversation, I said, the two sides are kind of getting lost in the region between each other. So is there still flexibility of the plan? Yes, okay, you're in a unique situation, okay, you have hundreds of acres, okay? Someone who has an acre has more flexibility than you do in light of what Rick shared as it relates to the width, okay? So it's not one size fits all, you understand that, I'm sure. Okay, so when you say is there flexibility, well, it really depends on where you're talking about amongst the line, and it depends on the findings that we find through the surveys. The flip side of that is that the 200 acres, yes, that width isn't gonna be as meaningful in terms of flexibility for you, whereas it would for a smaller land.
Right, and I do understand that, and I apologize. I do understand that, and I do think it's semantics when we discuss that. I think ultimately, not question, and this is where I want clarification and transparency. Not adversarially, I'm not trying to come in like that. Just please explain what stage of this process this is in. Because my understanding was that it was in the initial stage. This is the first meeting, last night was the first meeting for the landowner. But what I'm hearing is something very different from it. I'm hearing that, no, we kind of started already narrowing this down. That's why I asked Chris, when was the study actually started? Because, and I don't need exact month, I don't need exact date, I want exact year. Because then typically have to hit a level of planning before they can go on any piece of paper. And so that's where I wanted more clarification and more transparency.
Understood.
And I apologize, sorry.
And it ties into what my question was.
Let me say one thing, we've got your questions, and,
Yes, sir.
and we'll
Oh,
be
these
happy.
are.
No, but
May I finish, please? Hang on 1 second, please. We've got your questions, okay? And if you, we can add that, and we can follow up with you on that.
It's not that hard of a question, what year?
Sir, ma'am, with all due respect, I don't have that answer for you right now.
How do
okay?
you not
said
know?
this to us last night, I'm trying to be respectful.
Okay.
But the reason I came to tonight's meeting mostly, I was here for every minute last night, was for answers on two things. And one of them, you specifically said that you were not aware of, and that by tonight you would have us an answer when that gentleman asked you. And it was about properties owned by Tim Sweeney, and how everybody last night was talking about how it's such a coincidence that the offsets of each one of his properties look to be directly correlated with the offsets in your pipeline. And it would be a lot less costly for you with overall linear footage to run that more as a crow flies than the way you bounced it around his properties. And we all were how the cost of fighting up against Tim Sweeney and that property was likely why that route was pushed to where it was. And then tying to your concern, another gentleman had brought up why are we not looking into the alternative routes along Highway 64 or Highway 420? Now, you're all very intelligent people, obviously, or else you wouldn't be up here on this panel representing your corporation. I know you have access to all today's technology. You literally could have taken 5 minutes after last night's meeting and found answers to that. Tim Sweeney question to confirm